Thanks for staying with us. Let's move to this conversation now. The ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal also says it is not happy with the ruling around the former President Jacob Zuma. Let's speak then to the party's KZN Provincial Secretary, Mdumiseni Ntuli. Mdumiseni, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time this evening. Different media reports are citing that the province of KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC specifically, is not happy with the ruling. Talk to us then about your ruling, about the ruling, in fact, that was handed down yesterday.
No, thank you very much. Good evening to you and to all fellow viewers of SABC. We were in the PEC over the past 3 days, and then yesterday, of course, before we ended the PEC, the judgment was handed down. We gave ourselves some time to look at the judgment and its implications. There are a few things that were identified which we're very concerned about. The first one is that this matter has been taken to court by the Democratic Alliance, challenging a decision of the National Commissioner of Correctional Services. However, the conclusion of the court is saying that the judgment is handed down with cost. And the costs are also personally taken to former President Zuma as an individual. We don't know what does that mean. The second issue is that the DA was then joined as we would have expected, naturally. You know, the right-wing forces work together all the time. They were joined by the AfriForum as well as what is called the Helen Suzman Foundation. Ideologically, all of those people belong to one same school of thought. And all of them have their own interest in the dissemination of the African National Congress. Now, the court says it agrees with the Helen Suzman Foundation that the period at which JZ has stayed at home must not be counted as part of having served the sentence of the incarceration. What concerns us very deeply about that statement is that our jurisprudence recognizes the fact that you can be arrested at home and still be classified as a person that is arrested, as long as you adhere to all the rules and regulations attended to you as a person who's arrested at home. Why is that not considered when we are dealing with the JZ question? Why can't you say, of course, if there's a justification, we don't believe it, but if it exists, that the commissioner acted irrationally and that his decision was unlawful, why don't you set aside that decision and then say, but however, even when the victim or the offender was released, he still stayed at home and adhered to all regulations that he was meant to respect, as determined by the court of law. We have not understood the rationale around that question.
Are those the reasons then why you are deciding to join this court challenge?
We have then said we're going to engage the national leadership of the ANC because we are not a federal organization. It's the National Executive Committee that, if it agrees with our recommendation, will consider allowing the ANC to join this court case as a friend of the court in support of former President Zuma. The reason why we're doing that, the first one is that if you look at the judgment, for instance, now the legal part of this decision was taken. Look at the judgment. The commissioner acted on the basis of a recommendation by a member of a parole board, a medical parole board, Dr. Mpatwe, who made a recommendation which was rejected by the board that JZ would not be able to remain in the correctional service and get the kind of medical attention that he requires. The board was not happy. Correctly so, they referred the matter somewhere else, which was the Surgeon General. The Surgeon General came to the same conclusion, that this man is not going to be fit to remain inside the correctional service facilities. The board said, we still don't agree with you. Fine, maybe they are entitled to do that. But what then happened after that? JZ no longer stayed. Immediately after that, or a few days after that, his situation complicated and he was taken to a private hospital somewhere outside KZN. Why was that done? If the two doctors' opinions were irrational and not based on medical scientific attention.
So
that's the first point. But the second point, which is the last one, is that you see judges make decisions based on the interpretation of law. The leadership of the ANC and the leadership of our government, then bears the responsibility to manage the consequences of the decisions that are made by judges. Our view is that we must join this court, firstly, to raise the matters relating to the law and how the law in this case has been determined. But secondly, to then raise matters that we are perfectly entitled to raise. The consequences of judgments such as the one we had in July and its aftermath, and what we believe might also be a new crisis created, not for judges to manage, for the ANC and government to manage in the context of the new judgment.
So let's clarify here. You are still going to speak to the NEC about joining this particular court challenge. It hasn't happened yet.
Yes, the National Executive Committee is meeting tomorrow, and we're going to make a proposal to the NEC that we think it is in the best interest of the ANC to enter into this Berkeley, because in any way, this Berkeley against JZ, in terms of the recent case, is driven by our ideological opponent. It's not a genuine court process. The DA took up the matter because it has its own strategic agenda to obliterate and liquidate the African National Congress.
Mr. Ntuli, I'm curious, especially listening to what you say. The matter was brought to the courts by the Democratic Alliance. It's a political party. And of course, from what you're saying, there's no love lost between you and the Democratic Alliance. Now, why are you deciding to join now and did not do so before in order to then protect what you are talking about? Because I think that having to join post a ruling and in the appeal process may have been maybe a lack of foresight on your part?
Look, the matter at that time, we understood it to be purely a matter between the Department of Correctional Services as well as the Democratic Alliance, which was not happy with what was happening. And in our own view, we also gave the courts a benefit of doubt that this is not a court that is not located within the geographical space of our country. It understood what happened in July, and it will know that how you handle this matter and the conclusions you made might also lead to what is called unintended consequences. But the outcome has disappointed us. And that's the reason why we're saying we can't sit on the sideline and fold our arms because this matter is taken on the appeal. Why don't we join that? Because maybe there is part of what the ANC can, as a party, explain to judges, which has not been deliberated upon in the last hearing of this matter, which led to the decision we're talking about.
And what is it that the ANC is going to explain to the judges?
It's the fact that for instance, we are here because of, in our own view, a mess that was created in the first instance. In the manner in which the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo handled the question of JZ's unhappiness with his participation, becoming a judge and a juror on the matter that was directly involving him. Secondly, you and I and other South Africans are familiar with the content of the judgment that was delivered by the then acting Chief Justice Kambembe, littered massively with emotions, including at the end, as if it was not enough to deliver that judgment, writing a letter seeking to instruct a government department which of the correctional facilities must be used for JZs to be incarcerated. Where have you ever heard that? Is that part of the democratic dispensation that our people fought for? We don't think so. We're very happy that Minister Lamula and his team decided not to adhere to that directive, because it was in any event a directive that, in our view, was consistent with the orientation we saw in the judgment.
So, Mr. Ntuli, it sounds to me like, pardon me, I'm sorry for coming in there, but I have to ask you this. It sounds to me like the gist of your argument, I've heard all the other points you've made, you're not happy with the judiciary.
Well, it's not that we're not happy with the judiciary. We're not happy with the judgment made by judges. And of course, we do have unhappiness with other judgments which have been made by the same judges. But we've never said the entire judiciary, we are not happy about it. And we don't equate a judgment of the High Court in Pretoria as a judiciary judgment. That's why another court can still arrive at a different conclusion on the same matter. So,
Ntuli, take us into your confidence, if you will. How much of a crisis has this ruling created for the ANC internally?
We do not, at this stage, we can't quantify the nature of the crisis that this judgment would create for the ANC. Remember, the reason why we would not be able to do so is because this is a judgment handed down at the time when there's still going to be another protracted legal battle taking place within the same court in terms of the same judgment, going to the Supreme Court, going to the Constitutional Court, I do believe, ultimately. But what we are concerned about is that even before the crisis can be created, we now have an opportunity, because this judgment is handed down at the time when we have an opportunity politically to engage with the structures of the ANC in the province so that they work together with all of us to contain the situation, to defeat the negative tweets and Facebook messages, which seeks to position the ANC or some of the ANC members against the judiciary or in their support for Comrade Jacob Zuma. And we thought that we have an opportunity to deal with this issue because there is time between now and the appeal and possibly a further appeal to the Court.
Ntuli, unfortunately, you and I are almost out of time, but I have to ask you this, if you can please respond, briefly. Apologies about that. I do hear what you're saying, but surely this ruling creates some kind of a crisis with your structures. It creates some kind of a crisis with the mother body, given the different voices that the party is speaking in currently.
Look, the intention in any event was to deepen the crisis and divisions in the African National Congress. That's the sole purpose of the DA taking up that matter. It was essentially to create a problem in the ANC, and the problem in the ANC will be created when the ANC fails to speak with one voice. Firstly, in terms of supporting the process of appealing this judgment, and secondly, in terms of saying to its membership and society in general, let's allow these processes to be ventilated in court, and we must not be tempted to do anything similar to what we experienced in July 2021. I think at a leadership level, we're united around that. There may be some voices within our membership that are going to say, no, JZ is being sold again, we can't allow this, we must stand up. But the leadership has a responsibility to contain that environment and not fall into the trap that is created by our political opponents.
All right, thank you so much for your time this evening. I hope you and I will have a conversation post the NEC meeting so you can tell us if they did agree with that particular recommendation that you are making as the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you for your time. That was ANC KZN Provincial Secretary Mdumiseni Ntuli.